Well, I can't believe it's another year gone. 2025, done and dusted. A year that's had a lot of highs and then quite a lot of lows when it comes to gaming.
Hold it together! Hold it together!
And one of the things that kind of sucks about making YouTube videos is that there's never really enough hours in the day to be able to cover every single game that comes out. I mean, try as I might, there was a whole bunch out there throughout the year that I just couldn't get around to playing. Though, I am going to do my best to rectify that right now, with a massive video looking at a bunch of titles that I was aware of but, didn't have time to cover. I will say as well that this is not supposed to be some kind of all-inclusive list, and I'm just covering all the stuff people told me about in my comments section, or things that I personally wanted to play.
What more could I need?
So if there is a game that didn't make the list, well, I'm sorry, but chances are that I still don't know about it. Make sense? Right, let's get into it.
Let's get it on.
Right, so the first game in the list is Better Than Dead, developed by Montegallo, a bodycam styled first-person shooter set in Hong Kong, where you're playing as some poor woman who's escaping from the depths of this nasty underground human trafficking and sex ring. Apparently her captors have done some pretty heinous things to her, even filming it, which is why she's now wearing a bodycam, so she can film the revenge she gets on all these people who've done her wrong. The developer said that the whole concept here is that he took the premise of old Hong Kong action movies from the 80s and 90s and then wondered what it would look like from the perspective of a body cam. Well, we can wonder no more because this is what it looks like and it looks awesome.
Oh my sweet Jesus.
The whole thing opens up with her waking up in a cell, finding a gun conveniently left for her with a friendly note, clearly implying that there's a bit more going on here than meets the eye. And because she's got no experience with firearms, these early shootouts as you make your escape aren't going to be impressive or calculated, instead feeling very raw and visceral. After she escapes the building, it's then about going to these different locations and killing specific targets, along with trying to prevent any innocent civilians getting caught in the crossfire, which affects your luck, making shots more inaccurate and increasing the likelihood that enemies can hit you. There's a ranking system here too, where the time you take for a mission combined with whether or not you've killed a bystander affects the outcome. But what makes Better Than Dead so interesting has to be this visual style, with the whole body cam aesthetic combined with this weird digitization and censorship effect that even looks a bit like Kane and Lynch too. And while I don't usually like that whole body cam trope, I think in this instance it works pretty well, and aiming and shooting feels responsive and intuitive. The environments are quite literally photorealistic at times, and about the only thing stopping it from feeling like you're watching someone's live stream of an actual shootout are these goofy ragdoll physics. When you're wounded, the screen goes all blurry and movement and aiming become trickier, plus you can look down at the floor and see yourself actively bleeding out. And it's very easy to get killed here if you're bum rushed or ambushed by any of the enemies. The only assistance you've got is like a second or so of bullet time after doing a slide move, but otherwise it's fast and chaotic, with bullets whizzing past constantly, and utter pandemonium as people flee for cover or slump over furniture with a bullet lodged in their brain. Enemies will often feign surrender, and wounded enemies are going to writhe around on the floor in pain, and in both instances they'll often get back up and keep firing. So you're really incentivized to make sure everyone's dead, with it being pretty brutal how you can flat out execute these bad guys with a double tap.
That's rad.
Now, as for actually playing this thing, that is a little bit tricky as it's still in a closed beta. However, that's not stopping you from joining their Discord server and being a part of that community. There's only 5 levels in the current build too, with the first one being about escaping the building, then 3 of them about killing a specific target, with the other one about rescuing some poor woman. But it's still pretty easy to see the potential this thing has as a really unique, violent and engaging revenge story. I'd definitely like to see some weapons added in future builds though, along with maybe the option to tone down that amount of U-bobbing. But either way though, I'm definitely picking up what Better Than Dead's putting down. Up next is the early access release for Brutal John 2. I didn't even know there was a Brutal John 1, a textbook boomer shooter developed by Old School Law's team, where you're playing as Brutal John and his humanoid dog, both of which feel like walking homages to Duke Nukem.
Time to destroy this piece of shit.
And the cheesy tone is set right from the beginning with a prologue sequence on a train, which may or may not be a reference to Blood 2. Before it all turns out that the whole thing's been a dream, and you wake up in Brutal John's house that he's sharing with his gal pal, Jessica. Jess sends him out on a beer run where he bumps into Serious Sam, by the way,
Hey, John.
before he's then notified that the world's been taken over by lizards led by the evil Lucillian.
With the help of mining technologies, we lulled your vigilance and seeded your planet with reptiloids.
A mega powerful corporate entity who's taken over the world with his crypto mining technologies. Yes, you can't make this shit up. And in fact, throughout the game, you frequently come across these Bitcoin mining rigs you can destroy for extra cash.
Your planet has been successfully captured.
Anyway, John and his buddies go to Lucillian's office to try to stop him, only for John then having to flee and destroy the building. With the three of them then heading off to Lucillian's vault in space to rob it.
So what's the plan?
And the whole thing's just pure old school carnage with a whole roster of familiar weapons, like a pistol, shotgun, super shotgun, a rocket launcher, a minigun, plasma rifle, and a railgun. You can also drink energy drinks to increase your movement speed and eat pizza to refill your health. Mostly though, it all feels like one giant running reference to the Duke Nukem games.
This Lucillian bastard is gonna pay for shooting at my ride.
With even the basic enemies quite literally being pig cops, even making the exact same noise when they die.
I hate pigs.
You got what's basically just the Ripper from Duke Nukem Forever, which, much like that version, needs to be reloaded. And even grenades are similar to the pipe bombs, able to be detonated after being thrown out. One of the rocket launcher type weapons is also pretty much the Devastator, and you've even got a boss fight inside a giant stadium. And then on top of all of that, you'll spend a fair bit of time hanging out in strip clubs, handing over bills to pole dancers in exchange for a quick glance at the goods. Plus, there's also one very sad reference to Duke Nukem Forever here, and if you know, you know.
The gears broke this guy.
Later on in the game, you've got a level set in a ghost town out in the desert, followed by a minecart chase, which is all sounding very familiar. It's just that instead of starting in a casino, it actually ends in one. Yeah, one which happens to be owned by the YouTuber Brutal Slim.
Now, you're going to taste lead in your skull.
In fact, the whole campaign is chock full of these random little cameos and Easter eggs, like this room here with some random ugly fucking arsehole.
Wait a minute!
Now, that's not to say that this thing doesn't have any original ideas, and there is still quite a few really fun levels here and there. For instance, after that heist in space, you got a really cool one set on a moving train, which for some reason also has a strip club attached to it, because yeah, of course it does. There's a really cool vehicle section here at 1.2 as you're driving around in an armored truck, fitted out with a machine gun and missile launchers. And then later in the game, there's another opened up area where you can drive around on a motorbike. Along with this one that's set on a highway as you're jumping from vehicle to vehicle. A lot of crucial item pickups are locked behind these little arcade minigames you need to beat, these sort of one-off games within a game, and these are a fun alternative too to just having a look around for some kind of hidden switch. Plus, I really like too how some of these weapons are given alternate fire modes, like how the Ripper can fire out these spiked projectiles that bounce all over the place. And then the plasma rifle can fire out a straight beam, similar to the lightning gun in the Quake games.
Excellent.
There's also this bullet time mechanic added in here too, which isn't really necessary, but it does serve to highlight how great the gore effects in this can often be. But even just in terms of all the writing and the comedy stuff here, like, I was actually surprised at how often this game made me laugh. It's pretty obvious that the guy who made this doesn't speak English as a first language, which is fine, but it is for that reason and the delivery of some of these lines that made me crack up even more.
Man, fuck you. Fuck you. Fuck you.
I mean, the voice for John sounds like when a kid's doing their best impression of an adult. And the way this guy's able to chomp down on a cigar whilst also drinking whiskey is just hilarious.
Well, ain't that beautiful?
It is, however, still in early access and unfinished, but even in this current state, you're still looking at about 4 or 5 hours of content to get through. With that being even higher if you're going to go back in there and try and find all the secrets.
Soon I'll be rich.
All up though, damn good stuff. And Brutal John 2 proves that that tired old boomer shooter concept can still be fun when it's done properly.
Try some fitness next time.
Next up, we've got another shooter with Captain Voin Vacation Desperation. Yes, say that 5 times fast. A hand-drawn, action-packed epic inspired by the FPS greats, or so it says. Essentially what it is like a massive total conversion for Doom 2, where you're playing as the eponymous Captain Voin, a cigar-chomping pirate with a shotgun for an arm. Who early in the game loses his ship, the SS Salty, and is now stuck on a place called Orca Isle, going up against the vicious killer whales gang. All of whom really want to see him dead, and all have names like Dinky Sheldon and Professor Flats.
He has been defeated, sire.
The game's chock full of these hand-drawn cinematics, which really feel like one of those old Cartoon Network or Nickelodeon shows you'd see back on TV in like the early 2000s, combined with early Newgrounds era animations.
Please come in.
And the aspect ratio is purposely 4:3 instead of widescreen too, along with the audio being suitably low quality and highly compressed.
Fantastic.
All to the point where you could probably bullshit to someone and tell them that this was based off a show that actually existed.
Who said anything about my pockets?
Outside of that though, it's really just a pretty competent little shooter, and if you've played many Doom mods before this, well, then it's all going to feel really familiar. Seeing as Wayne's got a shotgun for an arm, that ends up serving as one of your starting weapons, but you'll then find a chain gun arm later on too, followed eventually by batteries which let you charge it up and fire out electricity, because apparently that's how that works. Instead of a rocket launcher, you've got this humongous cannon, which is pretty much just the same weapon from the Serious Sam games, just annihilating everything that it hits. Plus you can throw out explosive bottles of booze as well, which kind of serve as grenades or Molotov cocktails. Then finally, as a last resort, you've got Wayne's fists, though you'll probably not use these all that much. Instead of picking up medkits or armor pickups to stay on your feet, you're chomping down on shrimp or buckets of chum along with swilling booze. And Wayne is surprisingly agile too, able to propel himself forward by kicking, which is outright mandatory for some of the platforming stuff, but then also just a great way of avoiding enemy attacks. Oh yeah, and for some reason he's able to dolphin dive into the air out of bodies of water because, sure, why not? What I think really makes this game so much fun to play though and captivating is just the batshit insane nature to some of its levels. Things start off pretty sensibly at least, with the opening one having you down at the docks after your ship's been stolen, just jumping from pier to pier before heading into a submarine. Then the second level is like something out of the Life's a Beach expansion for Duke Nukem. We're going through this massive resort and checking out all the surrounding beaches. From here though is where it kinda goes apeshit. But because the third level is set inside some kind of underground laboratory, we can see all these freaky experiments and all these giant tanks, which then ends with you chatting to the spirit of Davy Jones himself. Later on you'll enter the Temple of the Ancients, and some of the effects here are just flat out psychedelic, with really trippy skyboxes and other bizarre textures, which pretty much comes about as close as it gets to an LSD experience inside the GZ Doom engine. It then ends with you freeing this ancient spirit called Thunder Dave, who's able to destroy every enemy on the screen using these one-off tokens. So, yeah, I guarantee you'll never have seen anything like this before, and the whole thing's just oozing with creativity and charm. I even just like the small details, like the panels popping up when you find a key, or that reaction from Wayne when he eats a whole load of hefty damage from an enemy. It definitely does still have that vibe of being a Doom 2 mod at times though, like you can very clearly tell which of the Doom 2 enemies some of these ones are based off. Like this very clearly Archvile inspired one that's got a damaging explosive attack you need to break line of sight of to avoid. But still though, this thing is pretty damn fun, and it's got about the right length to it where it ends before the whole gimmick runs dry. I mean, it's about 4 or 5 hours long, and that's just for the campaign. And then outside of that, you've got Riptide Rampage, which is a whole bunch of wave-based horde maps to clear as well, easily adding in like another few hours to the overall runtime. And for a $14 game made by more or less a single person, I'd say that's pretty good value.
And to the victor goes the spoils.
Next up is another similar game to Better Than Dead with Cop Bastard.
You bastard.
Another title making heavy references to 80s and 90s Hong Kong action flicks, just this time with a VHS aesthetic instead of a body cam.
One last scumbag.
Now, this one originally came out with a demo back in 2022, but that build had a so-called massive overhaul just a couple of months ago, which is why I'm bringing it up again now. I guess the story is you're playing as the eponymous bastard cop, the kind of typical hard-boiled throw the rules out the window type, letting the gun do the talk and then pretending that the book doesn't even exist.
Bye, book.
And right off the bat here, you're just getting pummeled with gunfire from nearby gangsters, who seemingly are just in never-ending supply. But don't worry, because you can give it back to them just as good, or else your name ain't John Bastard. You start off with a pistol here before then quickly finding both an Uzi and a shotgun, because, yeah man, what self-respecting bastard cop wouldn't be armed with both of those? And it doesn't take too long here to see the absolute carnage you can create, with almost everything you shoot at exploding into like a bazillion particles, as if all the effects in the game have been dialed up to 11. With the shotgun being particularly insane here, just outright sending enemies off to the Shadow Realm. Yeah, and I find it hilarious how you can still hear them groaning in pain from this thing, even after you've completely vaporized them. Later in the demo, you'll also find a very Dirty Harry-esque Magnum, which does the expected job of being able to blow someone's head clean off. Sadly though, you don't seem to have control over that whole slow motion effect, though it still does seem to do it automatically and frequently enough that it keeps things looking awesome. Cop Bastard also has a unique way, shall we say, of getting your health back. Because after every dozen or so enemies, you can fill up a spit meter and then spit on deceased enemies to get either 10 or 25 health points back.
Fucker.
Which might make this the only game that I'm aware of that lets you spit on someone's corpse.
Jesus smells better than you, Betchy.
Overall though, there's not really that much going on in the demo, with it easily being able to be beaten in about 20 or so minutes. And it definitely does feel like the kind of game that exists only because Maximum Action did it first. But I would still be interested to see how they're going to pad this thing out, to what I'd expect is going to be a somewhat full-length game. I mean, this kind of gameplay is fine and dandy for like 20-minute stints, but I do kind of wonder how they're going to manage to keep that interesting for multiple hours. Still though, as a basic proof of concept or a vertical slice or whatever you want to call it, this thing is pretty damn fun. And unlike your mum, it is free, so yeah, what do you got to lose, bitch? Or should I say bastard?
You bastard.
Now next up is Cultic's Chapter 2, the follow-up to Chapter 1, originally released way back in 2022, with this full-length second episode dropping back in September of 2025. And I've always absolutely loved what they did in that first chapter, which to me felt a lot like RE4's gameplay loop put into a tight, gritty and chunky first-person shooter, along with feeling quite a lot like a Blood sequel that we never had. To be honest though, I wasn't really vibing here with what they've done with Chapter 2. Because while it still does do all that good stuff that the first part did, for some reason it also tries to replicate the pacing, again being an incredibly slow burn, which is something that it doesn't really need to do considering the first chapter already did that. And I just feel like it really would have been better off if it got into things a whole lot quicker. Instead, it again takes its sweet time to get there, with the first 4 or 5 levels really being kinda slow, and often just devoid of enemies entirely, with these sections where you're just moving around these empty areas. Earlier combat is also really challenging because you're not given many weapons, nor even really all that much ammo. And also too, weapons are very reliant on being upgraded at workbenches to be the most effective. But then considering that most weapon parts are hidden away in secret areas, it really encourages you to try to find all of those, which, guess what, also slows the pace down even more. And that is how I would really describe this thing overall, it's just slow. One level has you searching a swamp for detonator charges, which are just hidden randomly in the nearby buildings, forcing you to search every single one of these meticulously. And then they just reuse the same concept in a later level as well, again forcing you to comb every single part of the map to find them. There's a level in a shopping center that starts with you in a department store that's got a bunch of mannequins around, and as soon as I saw these, I knew that at like one point there'd be a bit where I'd turn around and they'd all be standing in front of me. And guess what? Lo and behold, a few minutes later that exact thing happened. It hasn't really fixed any of the issues that it had with the first chapter either, and in fact, if anything, it's kinda doubled down on them. Like the absurd amount of health points that some of the enemies have. With these new armoured cops, for instance, that are a great example in how they just eat up all your ammo. I mean, I know you can soften them up with a Molotov cocktail, which, yeah, is fine in theory, as long as you've got a Molotov cocktail. A lot of the levels also take place in these large open areas where the cultists are always off in the distance, perched up on a ledge somewhere, and able to hit you with pinpoint accuracy. And a lot of the time they seem to be able to get you through walls or other surfaces that you'd think would provide cover. It's also very fond of throwing these faster melee enemy types at you as well, these annoying little pricks that come at you in droves. Along with these ones you encounter in the swamps, which I guess makes them swamp things. Probably the lamest bit is where you got to survive this humongous wave of enemies coming at you, eventually being attacked by a chopper. Oh, a chopper which you've already fought earlier on in the game. And this would have been fine if the chopper was consistent, but instead it just fires at you in these completely random patterns. You know how in like Half-Life 2, for instance, how the gunships would shoot at you for a few seconds and then reposition, which meant that you knew that after they'd stopped shooting, you could safely expose yourself to quickly return fire. Here in Cultic though, this thing shoots at you for 1, 2, 3, 4, or even 5 bursts, as many as it really seems to want to, before repositioning. So you never really consistently know when it's safe to come out and time your retaliation.
Am I so out of touch?
I don't know, I think that's just the problem when the first chapter was so amazing that everything that follows it is at best just gonna replicate something you've already experienced. But I did actually stop around the halfway mark at the fairgrounds because I just found the whole thing to be so monotonous. Like I said before though, like, it still does have some really good moments where the whole thing comes together. And I still really love the visual style and the aesthetic the whole thing has going on. Would I ultimately recommend it? Well, yeah, I would, because it's still a more than decent shooter. But the only real reason I'm including it here is because so many people asked me to. Plus I will say as well that they did just release a free expansion with this Home for Cultmas update. I could honestly fill this entire video talking about it, but it is still sitting at overwhelmingly positive on Steam, which means that most people seem to be digging it, and I'd assume that more people would if they chose to pick it up. Right, so I got fucking dogpiled on Twitter when I was chatting about this next one, but nevertheless, I still think this is a really interesting game worth mentioning. And that's Junji Ito's Maniac and Infinite Jail, which released in mid-November, developed by Soft Star Entertainment. It's a first-person horror game with references to a few of Ito's manga, with the most obvious one being to the long-running Tomie series, with Tomie herself even appearing in the game very early on and being a very crucial component to the overall plot.
君がトミーなのか?
私はトミエよ。まさか。
She's probably one of his most well-known characters too, being this seemingly unkillable entity that can constantly regenerate and even split off and grow into new clones of herself. And her character's famously known for corrupting people with this underlying sense of evil in the way she likes to control and humiliate someone. Doesn't help either that she's drop-dead gorgeous, which probably explains why she's able to so easily manipulate weak-willed men, which should give you a bit of insight into what's actually going on in the story here.
何か開けるものを見つけないと。
だから何?
Apart from that though, there's references in here to the story statues, the hanging balloons, the long hair in the attic, among a couple others. And even the cinematics kind of feel like they're referencing the mangas too, with it being a combination of these fully animated ones, which are surprisingly well done, along with these more basic ones comprised of still images that pop up across the screen, almost as if you're reading the panels off a page one by one. You're playing as some poor bloke here who's woken up inside this creepy mansion without any real idea as to how he got there. And after making his way out of the room, he comes across a statue that quickly comes to life and starts chasing after him for his head. With these things forming the majority of hostiles you're going to be going up against for the remainder of the game. Now, you got a few ways to deal with these. You can put down these magical traps, which take a long ass time to set, but do kill them instantly. You can push over these props like vases and suits of armor, which also destroys them. Along with the far more situational and arguably goofy dropping a chandelier on them from the ceiling, which almost feels like it needs a Three Stooges sound effect added in too. along with just hiding in closets to escape them if you've got no other means. I do think the death animation when they catch you is a bit piss weak though, with these things just choking you to death. I mean, I kind of expected them to rip your head off in real time or something and, I don't know, maybe put it on their body, which would have been really awesome seeing that unfold. Could have had it where the perspective could spin around and you'd see your freshly decapitated corpse still standing. But instead of that, it just fades to black. How boring.
That's a damn shame.
Still though, it is a pretty unsettling concept, you know, having these walking piles of plaster chasing after you. And then what's even more gnarly are the ones you come across that already have a recently severed human head on top of them. Anyway, early on here you're saved by Tomie. And then after meeting up with her, the two of you decide to find a way to get out of the mansion, with this area also serving as one of the main ways to save your progress. What most people are likely to do here is to find these 4 pieces of this golden mask, which then unlocks the front door to the mansion, clearing the path to freedom and almost seeming a bit too easy. Only to then show this incredibly nasty cinematic which shows you've done the complete opposite of escape. Because as it turns out, this is just one of 3 possible endings, with the game then restarting from the beginning and letting you try it all over again, and thankfully too letting you fast forward through all these cinematics you've already watched. This time you'll eventually find your way downstairs into the wine cellar, where you're then having to dodge this sentient hair from that hair in the attic manga, before meeting a new character in the form of Detective Shimizu, who's investigating the murders in the mansion, and seems to believe that it's the work of a serial killer, also unlocking entirely new areas of the mansion for you to explore, where from this point on you're now tasked with doing either puzzles for Tomie or the detective, with this then affecting which of the other 2 endings you're gonna get. Plus it also kinda goes to shit from that point too, with your character losing his marbles and becoming super paranoid and near hysterical. I'm not going to spoil the endings, but I will say that in typical Junji Ito fashion, it is pretty nihilistic stuff without any real resolution. But then again though, like, isn't that the whole point of those stories to begin with? Now one thing that I do have to mention here is the devs' admittance of using AI. On the Steam store page, it says that they used AI for descriptive text, which I'm gonna guess is for like English translation stuff. But then it also says that it was for a small number of textures, which, as far as I can tell, is for some of the paintings around the mansion. Like this one here, which is just blatant AI. Either that, or this is a cemetery built for fucking ants. And look, like, I know that AI stuff makes or breaks a game for a lot of people, and I am inclined to agree. But I'm going to step back here and just let people make up their own minds in regards to that one. I don't know, at least they didn't bullshit and were at least open about it. Either way though, getting through the whole thing took me about 5 or so hours, which for a $17 game ain't half bad. Is it the most amazing gameplay ever? Well, no it ain't. And it isn't super challenging, but it's spooky, it's weird, it's fucked up, and it's gross, and yeah, I had a lot of fun with it. Now up next is another game that I've really been dying to take a look at, and that's Mortal Sin, developed by Nikola Todorovic. Now, I actually played a hell of a lot of this back when it was in early access, only to kind of forget it existed when it launched, with that full version dropping back in August of this year and being very different to what I played before that. It's described as a chaotic, blood-soaked roguelike with procedurally generated nightmares and brutal melee combos, which is a pretty damn accurate assessment. And Mortal Sin does have 2 very interesting features, one of which has to be its whole combo system, with all the various melee weapons you can use, with a standard attack, a kick, bash, and an ability all being utilised in these dozens of different combinations you can pull off during combat. In fact, there's so many of these that you can even choose to have them come up on the screen at all times, even having a shuffle mode that keeps swapping through them. This all then ties into the second feature, which is this whole dismemberment system, where you can cut the limbs off enemies and watch them react accordingly. Like chop someone's legs off and they become a useless stump crawling around on the ground, or chop their head off and they wander around attacking blindly. Then top it all off with a parry move and you've got a pretty fun little combat system. When you first start out, you don't have access to any of the classes aside from the Berserker, who's kinda like your standard warrior, primarily using melee weapons like swords, which is kinda boring, but thankfully it won't take too long before you start leveling up and can unlock better characters to play as. with there being a pretty cool little roster of other classes to pick from, who all specialize in different weapons and have their own unique combos and moves. It's a whole lot of role-playing archetypes too, like wizards, paladins, and thieves, which all come with the expected loadouts. Like paladins using one-handed weapons and shields, while wizards use things like staves. There's a pirate here too who favors ranged weapons and can even throw out an explosive cannonball for one of his abilities. The monk on the other hand favors unarmed combat with lots of quick jabs and uppercuts, whereas the hunter prefers spears, and is able to temporarily vanish and go invisible for a powerful ambush. This was actually the one that I gelled with the most, I think, and this bloke attacks so quickly that you can pretty much lock enemies out of combat entirely. Some of these do definitely feel geared towards people with a bit more experience though, like the vampire who doesn't even have access to healing potions, but can instead get her health back through a bloodlust move. She just feels a bit too finicky and confusing though, but I can tell how someone who's not actually dog shit at the game would really be able to tear ass with her. You know, as much as I'd like to tear her ass up.
Yes.
Was that a bit too far? Now, the overall goal here is to make it to somewhere called the Maw of Sin to take on the final boss. And you got 3 areas to choose from to get there, which can be played in any order, with the cave, the dungeon, and the forest. The layout for each of these being randomly generated for each run, and then the difficulty being either higher or lower, depending on which order you play them in. Each area is then broken down into 5 separate stages, where after each of these you get a bit of a breather, and are also able to choose a new upgrade and potentially a curse, with a curse being like a benefit to your player that also comes with a downside. At the end of each of these areas there's also like a wave-based mode where you've got to take on all these incoming enemies, and then once you've cleared all 5 stages you're thrown back to this main hub and can choose where to go next. Make sense? Every now and then you'll also find these portals to these little pocket dimensions where you can even find extra gold and items. And that is actually a pretty key component to the overall gameplay, in how you're frequently finding new bits of gear from all the different weapon types to bits of armor, all of which had their own different stats and benefits. Might sound a bit confusing, but overall it's actually super easy to pick up, but ultimately challenging to master. Which really is the perfect recipe for the kind of game where you've suddenly lost 8 hours of your life and are wondering where all that time went. It does, however, have this really bizarre mechanic which I don't understand, which is the concept of these scares. Now these are essentially traps that if you stand in them for long enough are going to lock your vision and show you some ridiculous screaming face or something similar, which also absolutely fucking shreds your gear up in the process, needing a mana potion to repair. And the issue I have with these is that when you're being attacked by like a dozen enemies, it's the last thing you're thinking about, you know, because you're more than a little sidetracked with avoiding everything else. It just kind of feels like a gimmick and a bit of a lame way to make the game more difficult, which is something that it absolutely doesn't need to do, because believe me, this game is challenging enough as it is. In fact, in 9 hours, I was only able to beat it in 1 run, and even then it was by the skin on my balls. Should be said too that there is an insane amount of longevity here in the variety with all these possible routes, and even after you've finished a run, you can replay it in a sort of New Game Plus mode. There's also a 4th unlockable area called the Vessel, along with an NPC in the hub you can also level up as well, plus all those remaining character classes to unlock too. So it's going to be a long time before you get to the end of Mortal Sin. Overall, it's got a unique tone, visuals, and a premise, not to mention some gorgeously violent and chaotic combat, so yeah man, definitely worth checking out. Up next is Pigface, which is another really cool little early access game that dropped on Steam a while ago back in September, developed by Tito Loves You. Yeah, Pigface, a video game not to be confused with Your Mum.
Affirmative.
In this one, you're playing as a woman named Exit, a so-called fixer who's had an explosive device put in the back of her head to make her complicit.
One that I can detonate at any time.
Now tasked with doing a bunch of wet work jobs for some kind of shady organization.
We're sending you there with explosives. Blow it all up.
And if I had to sum it up, it'd be like, what if Rockstar Games made a first-person shooter back in the early 2000s that was a spin-off to the Manhunt series? I mean, have a gander at the visual style and these weird gangs you're going up against and try to tell me you don't see the similarities.
Basically what you're doing here is you're given all these missions by this mysterious agent, but given free reign in how you get the job done. For instance, the first mission takes place at a farmhouse overrun by these gang members where your main objective is just to find 2 folders of information. However, you can also choose to kill every single gang member in the area, and also loot the place dry for a cash bonus. And how you choose to approach all of this is entirely up to you.
Good work. Head back to the van.
If you explore the place further, you'll also find a mask in the attic, which is one of the many hidden away in each level, all of which give you different bonuses and extra effects. The second mission is more of the same, only this time you need to find a laptop hidden away in a rundown motel. Again, one that's overrun with junkies and various gang members, as well as destroying 3 drug labs and killing their leader. And while early on you're not given too many weapons or have too many options, stuck with basic things like baseball bats or a Tech 9, before too long you can start buying stuff off the laptop back at your apartment. Upgrading and increasing your arsenal, giving you far more alternatives, with new items unlocking after every main mission. So you can put laser sights or scopes on previously owned weapons to get around the fact that the game for some reason doesn't have a crosshair, even though this is most likely done by choice. And some of these guns are really fun to use too, like the LMG, which almost feels like cheating. You can also get a revolver and chuck a scope and a suppressor on that thing too, playing whack-a-mole with the enemies' heads, which again feels a bit like cheating. And speaking of compressors, putting one of these on any of the shotguns is far more fun than it should be. Especially with the automatic shotgun, I mean, that's about the closest you're ever going to get to playing as Anton from No Country for Old Men.
Well done.
There's even hidden weapons in there too, like a chainsaw, which, yeah, works exactly how I'd expect. And you can eventually buy even more powerful weapons, like a grenade launcher. If you ever get shot up during combat, you can jab up with heroin to refill your health, along with smoking cigarettes, which refills your health too, but then also increases your damage resistance, with the ciggy visually burning down in real time to show how long that effect lasts. And if you are actually killed, you lose your chunk of your cash to cover the hospital bill, which, yeah, reminds me of a certain other game series. Now currently there's only 6 missions in the game, including the first one, which is pretty much a tutorial that you can't even fail, but you can replay these as much as you want, earning enough cash to easily buy and upgrade every single weapon currently in the game. So the only thing it has really going against it is the enemy variety, where there really being none of it, and the vast majority of these guys just being the same couple of gang members. About the only real difference are these guys in heavy armor who pretty much behave the same but are just slightly more resilient, able to be knocked on their ass a few times before they finally go down. Still though, even in its early stages, this game is just insanely good fun, and the sheer freedom you're given to approach each mission, along with the weirdly comfy tone it seems to have, makes the whole thing highly addictive. And look man, like I'll happily shill PS2 era throwback games any day of the goddamn week.
We've got a new job lined up for you. I hope you like malls.
Finally though, we're at the last game in the list with Voin, which is kind of similar to Mortal Sin in the sense that it's got a whole dark fantasy setting and a focus on melee combat. However, whereas Mortal Sin was all about procedurally generated and mostly linear environments, Voin is set in multiple, vast, expansive realms that you're free to explore at your own pace. I've seen a lot of people comparing this thing to Elden Ring, and while I haven't actually played Elden Ring myself, yes, I know, if this is even remotely what it's like, then damn, I've been seriously missing out. And the best way that I describe some of the areas in this game is jaw-dropping. I mean, I genuinely had a couple of moments here where I came across a new location, and then I just sort of sat there absolutely stunned at how amazing the whole thing looked.
That was beautiful.
It's dark, gritty, and depressing, and enemies are these horrific-looking abominations that are like someone's worst nightmare come to life. It's great. And to think it's all been made by one person, a guy named Nikita Sozida. There's no map screen or objective markers, it's just you dropped into this gorgeous looking environment, and the sense of wonderment you get as you're investigating some random tunnel or a passageway, only to find that it opens into an entirely new city or a biome, is just incredibly satisfying. I mean, even just checking out the ass-crack edges of the map and coming across a random treasure chest is rewarding enough. Now, while this technically came out at the end of 2024, it did have a massive update in June of this year, adding in an entirely new location, which, yeah, reminds me a hell of a lot of Skyrim. In fact, you're even fighting frost giants here that look a lot like the ones in Elder Scrolls. Either way though, there's never been a better time to check this out, and even before you make it to that point, you've got a fair ways to go. Now, the story, as far as I can tell, is you're playing as some kind of warrior brought back from the dead to deal with these monsters and other horrific creatures that have corrupted the land. It's a mostly solitary journey, just you as this mysterious dude reclaiming the world back from evil, but there are times here when you do interact with other NPCs, making the whole thing feel slightly less lonely.
Name it.
And after a brief tutorial where you're taught the basics of the combat, which is mostly just parrying and dodging, you let loose on the world and pretty much able to go wherever you want. What you're ultimately trying to do here is find the location of these 3 bosses, the so-called flesh smiths, but the game gives you absolutely zero assistance in the process, outside of a couple of basic notes in your journal. You're encouraged to just head out there, forge your own path and discover it for yourself. Sporadic fast travel points make it so you can quickly get around to places you've already visited, and just like the Souls-like games, if you're killed, you can head back to your corpse to retrieve your belongings. As you uncover more of the map and kill things, you'll also constantly find new bits of gear to upgrade, and you can also enhance these back at your base using an essence called Ichor, dropped by enemies. And just with the weapons alone, you've got over 2 dozen to find.
God damn!
Combat is initially more about being reactionary, watching an enemy's attack animation and either dodging or parrying at the right time, and the controls are smooth enough that it quickly becomes second nature, all combined with some really satisfying sound effects to really emphasize the brute nature and force behind all these attacks. In fact, after a fight, you'll even see your character wipe the blood off the weapon. Perfect Parry does that thing as well, where it staggers nearby enemies and also boosts your next attack, and you could easily get to a fair chunk of the game by just parrying and dodging alone. But where it starts to get interesting is when you start leveling up all this gear and improving them through augments, where you can start relying a lot more on the upgrades, along with utilizing the various weapon abilities that they each have. Because the gimmick here is that once you've found an item or a weapon for the first time, you can now take the effect that that item has and put it onto another item. Essentially picking and choosing the ones you want that suit your playstyle the best. Certain weapons might do elemental damage too, and there's even the option to buff up each element's effectiveness too. I mean, consider you've got 6 gear slots here, weapon included, and just the amount of options that leaves you is astounding.
Whoa, slow down, egghead.
Even just considering all the abilities some of these weapons have alone. I like it how with some of the swords you can bang them together to stun nearby enemies with the sound. Another one summons in these spectral bells that you can then whack to do extra psychic damage, all of which, by the way, again can be stacked and applied to other weapons. And it's just so much fun buggering around with all of this stuff and then going out into the world and finding that your latest build just fucking destroys everything you were previously having trouble with. What I did for most of my playthrough was use a rune that made it so every 4th hit with a weapon caused lightning to strike nearby enemies. But then I was also using a weapon that did fire damage, along with me then adding an augmentation so it did frost damage. Later on I used another weapon and I pretty much spec'd everything into electrical damage, and this was shredding through everything, even on those higher difficulties. Plus it also had an ability where I could throw it out and it would spin in one place, hitting everything that was in range, which also had the benefit of proccing all my other augments.
Cool.
There's even just like simple things like weapons having the chance to spawn an ice pillar into nearby enemies.
The Iceman cometh.
You kind of see the point I'm making in how there's just so many options you got here, and this is just the stuff that I was able to come up with. I mean, I'm famously bad at playing these kind of games, and yet even I, like a certified dumbass, was able to get these utterly powerful builds. What I also think is a really neat idea is how you're constantly coming across loot drops for gear you already own, which levels it up passively, meaning that even if you're not actively using these items, it's still gonna level up and be somewhat useful, you know, even after you've sunk 8 hours into the game. If this is all sounding a bit piss easy, well, consider that Voin has a really deep difficulty customization system, where you can modify it to make it as easy or hard as you want. Doing things like increasing enemy count, the health and the damage they do, along with the appearance of tougher variants, like essentially champions. These higher difficulties though also increase the loot drop chances, so there's even an incentive to make it as hard as possible. So honestly, like, the only regret I have is that I didn't play this one sooner, and I could have honestly just sunk days into this thing alone. Plus, I can't really believe how much content it already has, considering it's still in early access, with a whole new biome already planned to be added in the future. So overall, like, another really awesome indie game, definitely worth checking out. Either way though, that about brings me to the end of the video. And like I said, I know I'm probably still missing a couple of dozen other games I could have talked about, but at this point, that's about all the energy I can muster. So if you can think of any other games worth checking out, then be sure to let me know in the comments section below. Oh yeah, and also too, being the end of the year and all that, I just want to say a big thank you to everyone who's supported the channel throughout the year. Every year I feel like it just keeps growing and getting bigger and better, and the support you guys all give me is honestly one of the main reasons I'm still making this content. So yeah, I hope you guys all have a great Xmas and a happy New Year's, and once again, thanks for watching.